Think of this video like a choose your own adventure. I'm not even going to tell you to watch the entire thing if you don't want to. I mean, I'm delightful, so you might want to, right? But you do need to be aware of what accessibility legal requirements apply to you and your business. Now, what kind of organization are you? What do you do? What do you sell? And where matters to your web accessibility requirements. Not all of these laws apply to you as a business or an organization. Also, this is a 2-second reminder that I am not a lawyer, certainly not your lawyer, and this is not legal advice per se. It's just an ADHDer's hyperfocus info dump that will be very helpful for you in your organization. Now, I have researched this a lot, and of course, I work in accessibility. Before we dive into those super fun laws I know you're excited to learn about, let's talk about the guidelines that govern most of these. Now, pretty much every single law we're going to talk about follows the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines to say whether or not a website is accessible to everyone. Also known as WCAG or WCAG, this international organization has developed standards for us to follow. While the most recent version is 2.2 and there are multiple levels, A, AA, AAA, most of the legal standards give you a bit of a break and they require you to follow level 2.1 AA. Now, AAA can be difficult to achieve, and we want to focus on creating a great experience for as many people as possible. So as we talk about these super exciting laws, I'll share which version of WCAG you need to follow, but you basically need to make an effort to be accessible without hitting every possible standard available. First things first. Now, are you a school or an educational institution? Fun fact, you're one of the most commonly targeted institutions for web accessibility lawsuits. Yay! Now, web accessibility in the United States is, in many ways, behind the rest of the world. Private people are handling the bulk of enforcement in these lawsuits. The Department of Justice in the US does bring cases against institutions, but that number pales in comparison to these other lawsuits. And honestly, web accessibility compliance is very much on your honor unless you get caught. But really, does anyone want to get caught and sued? I don't think so. Now, there are 2 sections of US law that apply to web accessibility: the ADA and Section 508. Now, you have probably heard of the ADA. This landmark law was passed in 1990 as the Americans with Disabilities Act. The ADA ensures that people with disabilities have the same rights and opportunities as everyone else. Now, to protect these rights, some people need specific accommodations. Now, I get it. You're thinking, hey, the internet wasn't in every home in 1990. But the ADA still applies. The Department of Justice continues to state that the ADA applies to digital assets. That means your websites, videos, learning materials, and more fall under ADA requirements. Now, if you work in higher education, you probably know this already. You're aware of the basic need to provide accessibility accommodations to students and staff alike, but this extends to your website. Now, specifically, as a publicly funded university, your website must be accessible in accordance with Title II of the ADA and Section 508. Basically, if you get any kind of federal funding, these 2 laws require that you provide equal access to technology and information. Now, your students need to be able to get the same information no matter what their personal abilities are. And the ADA just went through a recent update. Title II Part H, yes, I know this is all very technical, was added in April 2024 and comes into full effect in April 2026. Now, this specifically requires that your website and other digital content is fully accessible. Put super simply, both of these laws require any digital content you publish, including your website, follows WCAG 2.1 Level AA. Now, the international standard mitigates your risks and ensures equal access for students, faculty, and the public. Are you a business of any kind in the US? And I do mean any kind. Whether you sell products online, services, or install fences, you have to provide an accessible experience for everyone that visits your website. Fun news, if you're an e-commerce business, you are the single most targeted industry for web accessibility lawsuits by a lot. Yay you. Now, if you skipped the school chapter, totally get it. Let's recap a second. In the US, every organization is legally required to follow the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. Enacted in 1990, this does still apply to your digital assets, meaning your website. Now, unlike schools, you're probably not taking federal funding. In that case, you're required to follow Title III of the ADA. Now, Title III basically says that your website and any digital content is a place that requires public accommodation. That means no matter your customer's personal abilities and disabilities, they need to be able to have access to the same information, and they need to be able to do it easily. It doesn't matter if the people looking at your website live in the same area, city, or even state as you do. If they try to use your website and can't understand or access all public information, they could have an accessibility case. Now, just like with schools, a lot of web accessibility enforcement for businesses is driven by private people filing lawsuits. Again, we are pretty behind on accessibility laws in the US, so these suits are being used to drive wider compliance. There's good and bad behind the intent, right? Now, luckily for you, you generally just need to follow WCAG 2.1 Level AA to stay in compliance. Of course, the fun part about websites is that anyone in the world can access them from anywhere, right? Now, most of the web accessibility laws around the world recognize that if you're not actively selling in these countries, you may not have to follow their laws. So a fence builder in Kansas probably doesn't have to worry about what France wants. But if you are actively trying to sell inside a country, have a location in that country, or are trying to recruit students from that country, you have to follow their legal requirements. So before you skip the next couple of chapters, think about whether or not you actually can. All right, now I don't just mean, do you have a business in Canada? I'm talking about if you sell anything, including trying to recruit students from Canada. There is some good news. Canada is even more behind on web accessibility laws than the US. Shocking, I know, but there is the Accessible Canada Act that applies largely to organizations under federal rule. It's a work in progress, and their goal is to have everything kind of set up and ready to go by 2040. They're giving a nice runway. However, there are a few provincial laws. No, I don't mean Bell's Provincial Life. I mean provinces that might affect your organization. Now, one of those is the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, or AODA. This applies to any business or entity that sells inside Ontario. Great news that this law simply requires your website and digital content follows WCAG 2.0 AA standards or above. So if you're at 2.1 or even 2.2, you're already covered. Do you sell to people in or recruit students from the UK? You have to follow the 2010 Equality Act. Little side note brag. I actually learned web accessibility because of this law. I was working for the Scottish government publisher back in 2013, and everything we did had to comply. We actually won some awards for our work. So this is where everything really started for me. Now, under the Equality Act, organizations have to provide reasonable adjustments for individuals with disabilities. Kind of the same approach as ADA, but everything is just much more explicitly stated. Now, the UK requires that your digital assets follow WCAG 2.2 AA standards, and that you include an accessibility statement on your website or mobile app. Here's the fun thing about web accessibility laws outside of the States. Not following these standards can result in enforcement action from the UK government. It can also open you up to private litigation, but the UK government takes much more action than the US DOJ on this kind of stuff. Just a warning. Now, do you sell to people in or recruit students from the EU? You have to follow the new European Accessibility Act, or EAA. This was enacted in 2019, but it really just went into effect over the summer of 2025. The EAA is focused on improved access and non-discrimination. Now, this act applies throughout the European Union to standardize accessibility requirements. So much like the UK's Equality Act, the EAA applies to most businesses that operate within the EU. And much like every other law we've covered, the required digital assets need to follow WCAG 2.1 AA. Now, enforcement varies by country, and you might want to Google whatever country that you operate in within the EU, but these can include steep fines. And of course, you're open to private litigation. Okay, deep breath. That was a lot. No matter where your organization is, you probably have some web accessibility laws that you need to be aware of as you're creating content. And we just scratched the surface. Where do you even begin? Obviously, ideally, you're going to implement WCAG 2.1 level AA standards into your website and just every digital content piece you put out. But there's a lot that goes into these standards. So to give you an idea of what you're looking at needing to change, some of the basics of 2.1 level AA include your images have descriptive, alternative text tags, captions for video content, transcripts for audio content, readable color contrasts. Websites are navigable with keyboards. Animations don't have more than 3 flashes per second, and animations are pausable. And of course, your copy is readable. If you have no idea where you are and how your website stacks up, I personally recommend an accessibility audit. You'll be able to identify exactly what you're doing well and what is putting you at risk. And one thing that we tend to forget is that web accessibility is a habit. You can spend a lot of time and money fixing your website, but you have to do it right going forward, or you're knocked out of compliance pretty quickly. Now, this means training your staff, investing in tools, and even creating some new standard operating procedures around your digital content creation process. To me, of course, the great part of accessibility is that, yes, it's an investment. Okay, I get that. But it's not only one that helps your customer and provides excellent experience for them, it also improves their success, increases inclusion, and ensures that your organization is available to everyone, regardless of their personal abilities. It's time to take a deep look at what you're putting out on the web and see if you're compliant.